My favourite painting of all time is Marcella by Ernst Kirchner, painted over 100 years ago in 1910. I first saw it when I was maybe 11 or 12 years old. I was quite an introspective kid. I often found myself recognising this feeling that I saw in that painting, the exact same way. I'd often drift off and get very sensitive about life and the universe, and I felt she would understand me. Sat here now, it's still my favourite painting, but for a very different reason. When you tell someone what your favourite painting of all time is, it tends to get quite a funny reaction. People try to look at it quite objectively to see if they agree. It tells you far more about that person than it does the quality of the artwork in question. It's not always the execution, it's the association. It's how you witnessed it, where you were in your life, how you felt, who you were with. I often find myself looking at older members of my family as they drift off listening to Clapton or Hendrix and know that I'll never hear the music the way they hear it, because they are not drifting off into just the artwork, they're drifting off into memories. It's impossible to understand why someone loves a painting if you don't understand them. For me and Marcella, I guess I was an only child who occasionally spent a bit too much time with themselves, and I saw in her maybe a sister. Hey you, I know that feeling. You're over there, I'm over here, we should hang out. We'd get each other. Whenever I saw a black and yellow stripy dress, I'd wonder, how did she grow up? And whether she would have found that thing that she was looking for, that kind of glint of something distant in her eyes. Now, today, I look at her totally differently. I feel more protective. I just want her to be okay. I'd only ever seen representations of her in books, magazines, online. All the colours were different. Sometimes her skin would be orange, her dress green, the lines that draw around her arms black, purple or blue. She would be faded or far too saturated. I study this painting all the time. Her cat, her composure, her colours. I'd see symbolism in it everywhere. The potential in those red shoes to just go, but they're trapped by this kind of trip hazard of bottles of booze before this blue glow of a place she would much rather be. I knew that one day I'd have to go and see her in real life, but I just didn't feel like there was any rush. It never occurred to me that not only might there be something like a pandemic or a war in an area that means you can't go and visit it anymore, but also that morality around the creation of artwork often gets reassessed. And in this case, I'd never really given much thought to the creator of this artwork. I just followed it and loved it. It turns out that it's quite problematic. As I was told by a German friend of mine, that this woman was most likely an underage prostitute. And Kirchner, by his account, was not a particularly pleasant man. He told me as though it were to make me reassess how I saw the painting, if I wanted to support going to visit the painting. He suggested that I shouldn't. Immediately, it made me want to go more than ever. So I'm in Germany, and I've come to see my favourite painting of all time, which is a painting by an artist called Ernst Kirchner. It doesn't take a lot for you to suddenly not be able to go and see your favourite art, either because it suddenly has some taboo associated to it, or you can no longer go and visit those things. Just like how it's quite hard to visit areas of Russia and Ukraine right now. Just a couple of years ago, the world had a little spasm and it became very difficult to actually travel. And so I realised I need to get on with it and actually go and see the art that I really want to see. I've always felt like someone who can detach the art from the artist. The artist in question here is Ernst Kirchner, German Expressionist painter, born on the 6th of May 1880, and one of the founders of the artist group De Bruycker. The group aimed to throw out traditional realism, and his studio became a venue which overthrew social conventions to allow drugs, sex and no rock and roll, because this was 50 years before the 60s. The shows they put on were widely celebrated across Europe at the time. It was seen as breaking up stuffy conventions. The more I tried to find out, the more conflicting narratives would appear that Marcella and her sister were actually the neighbours' daughters, and by many accounts they were all very happy and everything was harmonious and harmless. Any documentation that includes a moral judgment tells you more about the morality of the author and their culture than the era examined, and his actions certainly would not fly today. It does feel awkward. Many of the models were often between the ages of 10 and 15. Indeed, the way they talk about these models is very uncomfortable to read. Positions of power, abuse and consent are more exposed and explored now than any time in the past century, so it feels awkward to judge a man born nearly 150 years ago. And ultimately, he was a man traumatized by the First World War, who had some success before the Nazis came in and labelled all of his work as degenerate, put it in an exhibition of degenerative art, destroyed much of it, and were just 10 hours away from his home in the Swiss Alps when he decided to take himself out onto his porch, put a gun in his mouth and take his own life. It's a difficult life that this man lived, and he created some wonderful work. And I don't want to sit and defend him. He could have been an arsehole. Do I support his estate and legacy in paying to go and see this painting? If it's someone who was not a nice man. So it's hard. Standing in front of her in Berlin, I don't know what I expected. As though, after all my efforts of trying to get through to her, some strange part of me expected her to stand up and leave the painting to greet me, or that I would just see an empty sofa. Marcella, long since having grown up and moved on, but no, she just sat there, as uninterested as ever, just as she's always been, totally inaccessible. I've tried to persuade her, look after her, tell her everything will be okay, but really, she doesn't care. And it became clear to me that I've always been drawn to slightly moody, emotionally distant people, as though I was looking for her in them. Paula Rego once said, "We paint pictures to understand secrets that we keep from ourselves." The artist himself was not painting Marcella. He was also painting himself. I remember a poet once telling me that once you create a poem and you put it out into the world, it is no longer yours. And I think that's the case here as well. It's become mine. I'm not looking at Marcella when I look at that picture. I am looking at myself. So if there is a great piece of art that you want to see, that you've put off, or a play, or a concert, you have no idea when it may get taken away from you. Liking the artist might be frowned upon, but the art is yours.